going to carry on and feel free to network after that, so the conversation can carry on. And it can carry on also in a number of ways. There will be a LinkedIn site set up, and you'll get an email inviting you to take part in that, probably tomorrow. Of course, in the usual way, if you don't want to take part, just unsubscribe. Don't be offended by being asked if you do want to take part, though. And I suspect a lot of people would like to carry on this conversation. But let me ask you, if I may, what do you think from this morning? What insights have you got that you would think you would like to carry on? Are there things which, between us, we should be doing as a sector to respond more to you? Do you need more platforms like this? Any thoughts on that? Yes, so point down here. Keep going forward. Oh, one here, and then another hand up. Sorry, go on then. And if you can also, gentlemen here with the poppy on a tie, and then here.
Stuart Palmer again from Five Talents. I would suggest one outcome from this morning would be sharing of some of the standard platforms and methodologies that are in place. I spent nearly a year trying to put together a social impact bond for Tanzania. It's deemed too small by most of the major players. I thought it would be money for old rope coming back here and raising money that offered a very tasty return in the UK, but once you look at all of the obstacles that need to be jumped through, it becomes quite a major piece of work. So I'd be interested to know from the panel whether there are some standard or some emerging standards in terms of instruments that could be made more widely available to particularly smaller not-for-profits who are seeking debt-type finance in different situations.
Okay, thank you. Let me just get another couple of questions before we pause. Yes, the gentleman there with the beard. And before you, sir, I've got a microphone at the back. Yes, please.
Vanita Manchandra, I'm a trustee at Relate, which when I joined I was surprised to discover is a federated charity. And in fact I think a lot of the discussions on mergers here, an easy starting point to take out costs in the charitable sector is perhaps a focus on federations. There's a lot of duplication that happens. That's my first point. And I think a lady in the audience mentioned that she worked in a charity where it had a federated structure and took out costs, and I'd be interested in engaging in a conversation with that on that.
Thank you.
Secondly, the other point that I thought was of major interest today was the discussion on social impact measurement, which I think means different things to different charities. And while we obviously all aim to put things into numbers, the numbers can only be as good as the data going in. And I think this is perhaps one of the roadblocks to investment sector becoming larger, because as I think Nick mentioned, different people want different things, and I'd be very interested in a discussion on social impact measurement. Thank you.
Thank you. So.
Hello, my name is Dan Fletcher, a trustee of Rethink and also from Kingston Smith. My point was going to be the same on impact measurement. It's been mentioned a few times, and as the last person just said, there's a lot of variability in how people measure impact, how they present that impact. Nick made the point about intent of impact measurement and the purpose for doing that, and very interesting comment about net impact, which maybe is missed out in quite a lot of impact measurement for specific charitable endeavours, and a discussion around that I think would be very, very, very valuable and influential.
Excellent. Thank you. Now, at this point, I know that some of my colleagues in the room are actively looking for help to develop some of the themes for further conversations and relevant activities. And if I could ask Geeta, if you would stand up, please. Geeta Rabindra Kumar is from Big Society Capital. Claire Thwaites are you in the room? Yes, is from Alia. And Emma Patmore, are you in the room? There you are. Emma is from Trustees Unlimited. Now, between us, and Neves at the back, now, if you beeline to any of these folk after the meeting in the networking space, they will be delighted to take some of the ideas further forward and come up with some ideas. I do know that London Stock Exchange, as I mentioned at the start, have been particularly helpful, are very keen that we should carry on these sorts of conversations, and in that line there are sessions coming, I know, on the retail bond market and in particular on the charity interpretation of that marketplace. They are to come. We are now at 10 o'clock. I will just take one more round of questions if there are any, and then we will break, and those who need to get away can get away, and those who want to stay carry on the conversation can do so. Yes?
Roger Howard, I'm a trustee of a drug and alcohol charity. What are the lessons where a charity's business model is heavily contingent upon the regular re-tendering for public services? And I know Anna was saying you don't want to just focus on what the public benefit from reducing public costs, but where the triannual recycling of contracts and things like that, how does that dovetail with a longer term return on investment? Have you any experience yet where charities are relying on that to begin to repay some of the, whether it's loan or investment capital? Are there any lessons that we can take from anywhere?
Now, who's going to volunteer?
I'm just thinking about them, and I don't actually think that any of the investments we've made have been dependent in that way. But those of you that know about what happened to the Peterborough experiment will, like us, I think, have learned that governments can move the goalposts. And that has made us much more wary of investing in those sorts of areas, which I think is very unfortunate, because one of the great strengths of the Peterborough investment was that it was going to be an investment over a period of 5 years. So I think we're wary. Diana is in the room, and if I got it wrong, Diana, say, but I think that other than the Peterborough SIP, none of our investments rely, as you say, on re-tendering in order to get the capital repaid. I am correct, she's nodding, thank you. Lesson learned.
I think the point you raise is a very significant one, because much of the sector does have some form of engagement with the state as the major commissioner of social outcomes. And that raises for the sector major issues, first of all about the commissioning process. And I'm sure we've all got scars. Many of us will have scars from commissioning processes that we've been engaged in. We'd like to see a much more user-friendly commissioning process for social sector organizations than is the case today. Secondly, the sort of trend towards payment by results for charities and social enterprises that are delivering these services obviously creates a financing requirement, because you've got to deliver the service before you get paid. I think that's a challenge, and it's an opportunity in the context of the sort of discussion that we've been having today. I think that trend towards payment by results is likely to continue and grow rather than shrink. So I think there's a clear intersection there of the kind of wall of money that UBS has to place and the needs of the sector. Thirdly, and finally, a social impact bond, which we've referred to on a number of occasions during this conversation, I look as merely an envelope within which that kind of funding for working capital can be provided. It's a risk shift as well, obviously, to the social investor, away from the provider, to the point that was made earlier by someone about standard approaches. I'd love to see a much more standard template created, which would enable us to take the experiences that we've had, good and bad, from social impact bonds and make them much more accessible to the sector.
Thank you. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we are just about 4 or 5 minutes over the time that we thought we would conclude. The conversation can, of course, carry on back where we came from, and do carry on on LinkedIn. But can I just thank the panel for their time this morning and their insights they've shared with us, and perhaps we could thank them in the usual way. I can conclude by asking Neve, thank you for organising a thoroughly good event. Is there anything I've missed off before I turn the microphone off?
No, it's been a great job.
Thank you very much indeed. In that case, we can network and carry on.